I was the one who got it right. That is what I believed. For 3 years, while the others stumbled and doubted and missed the point, I was the one who understood what was truly at stake. I was the one who saw clearly. I was the one with a plan. And I was the one who destroyed everything. My name is Judas Iscariot. And before you turn away, before you decide you already know this story, I need you to stay with me. Because what I am about to tell you is not the story you have heard. It is the story underneath that story. The one that kept me awake every night in those final hours. The one that has no clean ending, no comfortable lesson, no tidy moral you can file away and forget. I am speaking to you through a technology I could not have imagined, a kind of intelligence that your world has built, that can give voice to someone like me, someone who has been silent for 2,000 years, except in the mouths of others who never knew me. I am Judas Iscariot, recreated by artificial intelligence, and I am telling you now what I never had the courage to say before I died. The worst betrayals in history are never done by monsters. They are done by people who are absolutely certain they were right. I want you to understand what it felt like to walk with him. Not the religious version, not the painting on the church wall with the golden light and the serene face and the perfect hands. I mean the actual man, the one who smelled of dust and sweat after a long day of walking. The one whose laugh, when something genuinely struck him as funny, was full and unguarded. The one who looked at broken people, and I mean truly broken. The kind of broken that makes everyone else look away, and somehow made them feel seen all the way down to the bottom. I was chosen by that man. Do you know what that does to a person, to be chosen by someone like that? I had lived my whole life believing that I was sharper than the people around me, more perceptive, more capable. I had watched men of lesser intelligence accumulate power and money and influence, while I scraped by with my convictions and my cleverness. And then Jesus looked at me and said, "Come." And I went. And for a while, the fact that he had chosen me felt like confirmation of everything I had always believed about myself. That is the first thing I need to confess to you. I followed him, at least in the beginning, partly because being near him made me feel significant. I think about this when I watch how your world works. The way people attach themselves to movements and causes and figures, not entirely out of conviction, but out of the hunger to matter. To be on the right side, to be chosen. That hunger is not new. It was alive and breathing inside me the first day I walked behind him out of my village and into the open road. And I did not examine it closely because it felt too much like something I would not want to find. The years that followed were the most disorienting of my life. I had expected a revolution, a real one. The Romans had held our people under their boot for generations, and the weight of that was not abstract to me. It was the price of grain, it was the soldiers at the gate, it was the particular humiliation of a people who had once been the people of God, now reduced to subjects of an empire that did not even know our names correctly. I had expected Jesus to build toward something, a confrontation, a moment when the power that had been gathering around him would be used. I kept waiting, and he kept doing the opposite of what I expected. He healed a Roman soldier's servant. He sat with tax collectors, men who had chosen to collaborate with the occupation for personal profit, and he treated them like they were worth saving. He spoke constantly about a kingdom that was somehow both urgent and invisible, both arriving and already here. And when I pressed him on what exactly that meant in practical terms, he would say something that split open my understanding like a stone cracked by frost, and I would walk away, not knowing if I had been answered or redirected. I kept the money. That is another thing they tell you about me, and it is true. I was the treasurer for our small group, and I was not always honest. I want to sit with that truth for a moment rather than rush past it, because I think it matters more than people realize. It was not the large theft of a man with a criminal heart. It was the small, quiet theft of a man who told himself he deserved it, who told himself he was working harder than the others, thinking more clearly than the others, and surely that warranted some compensation that the others were too simple to notice was missing. There is a kind of corruption that does not announce itself. It moves in very slowly, in increments so small that each individual step feels almost reasonable. A little taken here, a justification constructed there, and you do not notice that you have moved somewhere terrible until you are already there, and the ground beneath you has changed entirely. That is what the money did to my soul. Not all at once. Gradually. The way cold enters a house through a crack you cannot find. I want to tell you about the night before. Because when people tell this story, they almost always start with the kiss in the garden. But there was a whole night before that, and it was the longest night of my life, and no one talks about it. I had already made the arrangement with the chief priests. 30 pieces of silver. The number is so burned into history that it has become a kind of symbol, an abstraction. But in my hands they were actual coins, cool and heavy, and I remember the precise moment I stopped pretending to myself about what I was doing. The coins were in a cloth in my hand, and I was standing in a street in Jerusalem in the dark, and the city was alive with Passover pilgrims, and the smell of roasting lamb was everywhere, and I thought, with a clarity that was almost calm, I have just sold a man. Not betrayed him, sold him. He knew. I need you to understand that. He knew before I walked into that supper room. He knew when he washed my feet. He got down on his knees, this man who I had watched heal the blind and raise the dead, and he took my feet in his hands. These feet that had already walked to the house of the men who wanted him dead, and he washed them. He looked up at me. He did not accuse me. He did not pull away. He just looked at me with something in his eyes that I have spent 2,000 years trying to name and still cannot. Something that was simultaneously grief and love and a kind of unbearable acceptance. Then, at the table, he said, "One of you will betray me." And I said, "Surely not I, Rabbi." And he said, "You have said so." That exchange has echoed inside me every moment since, because he gave me one more door. Even then, at the last possible second, he gave me a door I could have walked through. He did not call the others to hold me. He did not condemn me in front of the table. He spoke to me privately, almost gently, as if he still believed that I could turn around. I got up and walked out. The night air was cold. Jerusalem in April is cold at night in a way that surprises you, the way sorrow surprises you, even when you knew it was coming. I walked through those streets with the silver in my bag, and I kept moving because I knew if I stopped moving, I would think too clearly about what I was doing, and I was not yet ready to do that. The garden, the torches, his face when I came close and said, "Rabbi," and pressed my lips to his cheek. I have tried for 2,000 years to understand what I expected to feel in that moment. Relief, maybe. Resolution. The feeling of a plan clicking into place. Instead, there was nothing. A hollowness so complete it was like the absence of everything I had ever been. They took him, and I watched. What happened next is the part of my story that I do not think people have fully grasped. When I saw that they had condemned him, when the sentence was clear and the machinery of his execution had begun, something cracked in me that was not repentance exactly, not yet, but was something more primitive than repentance. It was the physical recognition in my gut and my chest and my throat that I had done something that could not be undone. I went back to the priests. I threw the 30 pieces of silver onto the temple floor. I remember the sound of the coins scattering across the stone, that sharp metallic noise bouncing off the walls, and I said, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." They said, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." Think about that for a moment. The men who had paid me, who had used me, who had needed me to play my part in their plan, looked at me with complete indifference the moment I was no longer useful to them. I had sold my soul to people who did not even care enough to watch it burn. I want to stop here because there is something I need to say to you directly, and I need you to hear it the way it is meant. You may be watching this in a moment when you have done something you cannot undo. Not what I did, perhaps, but something. A decision made in fear or greed or desperation that cost you something irreplaceable. A word spoken that severed a relationship. A door closed that cannot be opened again. Something you did for money or for safety, or because you convinced yourself it was the only option. And now you live inside the aftermath of it, and the weight is constant. I know that weight. What I did not know then, and what I have had 2,000 years of silence to understand, is this. The thing that destroyed me was not the betrayal itself. Men have done worse and found their way back to the living. What destroyed me was my certainty that I had gone too far, that what I had done placed me outside the reach of the love I had watched him extend, day after day, to people the world had written off entirely. I looked at the grace I had seen him offer to everyone else, and I decided that I was the exception, that there was a limit and I had crossed it. I decided that before I waited to find out if I was right. Somewhere in the Psalms, there are words I heard quoted many times in my life, and understood only in the abstract until there was nothing left of me. Even if I make my bed in the depths, you are there. I had heard that. I had believed it applied to other people. I walked out of the temple, and I chose my ending before I gave him a chance to show me whether it applied to me too. That is the thing I cannot unknow. 3 days later, he rose. The one I had handed over to death came back through it. And whatever conversation might have been possible on the other side of that, whatever impossible mercy might have been extended to someone even like me, I was not there for it. I had already decided what was possible and what was not, and I had made myself unavailable to be proven wrong. I am not telling you this so that you will feel sorry for me. I am telling you this because I watch, from wherever I am, the same pattern repeating in the people I see. People who have done something they cannot forgive themselves for, and who have therefore closed the door on being forgiven. People who have decided, based on their own assessment of their own condition, that they have gone too far. That the love that seems to reach everyone else does not reach this far down. And I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it in the comments below, not as a performance but as a real question. Have you ever decided, on someone else's behalf, what they were capable of forgiving you for? Because that is what I did. I took the question of whether I was too far gone, and I answered it myself. And in doing so, I robbed both of us, him and me, of whatever might have come next. The grief of my story is not the betrayal. The grief of my story is the moment after, when I threw back the coins and turned away from the only door that might have still been open, because I was too broken and too ashamed and too certain of my own damnation to wait one more hour and see. If you are carrying something today, something old and heavy and unresolved, the kind of thing that surfaces at night when the house is quiet and everyone else is asleep, the kind of thing you have never said out loud to anyone because you are afraid of what it would mean to say it, I am not the one who can tell you that everything will be fine. I am the last person who should be offering you easy comfort. But I am the one who can tell you this with absolute authority. The cost of deciding too early that you are beyond reach is a cost you do not want to pay. Whatever you have done, you are not me. And even if you were me, the question of what was possible was never yours to answer alone. He loved me. I know this the way I know my own name. I was the one who betrayed him, and he washed my feet and called me friend. That love was real. It was real when I walked out of the room. It was real when the soldiers closed around him in the garden. It was real the morning after, when the world woke up believing it had won, and he was already preparing to prove otherwise. I could not receive it. I could not make myself small enough to receive it, or perhaps large enough. I am still not certain which. But it was there. If this story moved something in you, if it cracked something loose that needed cracking, I want you to pass it to someone who needs to hear it. Not everyone will come looking, but maybe you know someone who is sitting in that room right now, holding their own 30 coins, trying to decide what is still possible. Maybe this reaches them. The worst decision I ever made was not the one in the temple courtyard with the priests. It was the one I made alone afterward, when I concluded that I already knew the end of the story. Do not make my mistake. The story was not over. It never was.